Hello. In this video, we're going to be solving systems of equations using substitution. Let's get started. Now, there are other methods of solving systems of equations besides substitution. Some other popular ones are elimination and graphing and using matrices. Uh, in this class, we're only going to do substitution because it always works. Well, we're also going to do graphing, but that's for later on. Uh, but substitution always works uh, if there is a solution, and it's pretty easy. Alright, so what you have to do is you have to solve one of the equations for one of the variables. Now, in all the systems that we're going to do, it's a linear and then something else system. It can be either a linear equation and a linear equation, or it can be linear and quadratic. It can be linear exponential. It can be a line and a circle. And in all of those, you'll usually find it easiest to solve the linear equation for y first instead of trying to solve the other equation for y. Now sometimes the other equation is already solved for y, and in which case you can just use it for step 2, which is where you substitute for the value you solve for. In other words, you take the variable out of the other equation and plug in what's equal to it. Now after doing that step, you only have one equation or one variable in the equation, so then you solve for the variable. Now if it's a nonlinear system, sometimes you'll get more than one answer. And after you find your values for that, when you plug it back in, I usually plug it back in where I solve for y to get my other solutions, or my y values for my solutions. Alright, let's do a couple examples. In this first example, we have a linear system. So our first step is we need to solve one of these for y. I want to solve the top one for y. It doesn't matter. Either way, you'll get the same answer. So we got x minus y is equal to 3 as our problem. And I'm going to subtract x from both sides. So we get negative y is equal to negative x plus 3. So then I'm going to divide both sides by negative 1. So I get y is equal to positive x minus 3. Alright, so now that I've got y solved for, I'm going to take and I'm going to plug this value in, or x minus 3 in, exactly where I see y in my other equation. So I've got 7x minus, and then where the y was, I plug in x minus 3. Alright, and now I got to solve for x. So I distribute the negative, and so I get 7x here minus x here plus 3 is equal to negative 3. Combine like terms, 7x minus x is 6x. Now I gotta subtract 3 from both sides. So I get 6x is equal to negative 6. Divide both sides by 6. And we get x is equal to negative 1. Now I'm not done yet, because we have two variables we have to solve for. So I'm going to take this negative 1, and I'm going to plug it in right here for this x value to find y. So we get y is equal to, and then where the x was, I plug in negative 1, because that's what x is. They're equal. Alright, so then y would then be negative 1 minus 3, which is negative 4. So usually when you have a system, you write the solutions in as ordered pairs. So we've got negative 1, negative 4 as our solution. Alright, now you may also want to check your answer by plugging in the values for x and for y. So for example, plug in negative 1 for x, negative 4 for y. Negative 1 minus negative 4 is the same thing as negative 1 plus 4. That does give me 3, so it works for that one. Plugging into the other one. 7 times negative 1 is negative 7. Minus negative 4 is the same thing as plus 4, so negative 7 plus 4 does give me negative 3. This one works. If you can't do it just by thinking about it, you may want to write it down. Uh, write down both of them, work them out, crunch the numbers, make sure it works. Check your answer. It's a good thing. Example 2 says, solve the following system of equations. We've got y is equal to x squared minus 6x plus 9, which is a quadratic equation, and y plus x is equal to 5. So I'm going to start by solving the linear one for y by subtracting x from both sides. So we get y is equal to negative x plus 5. Alright, so now I take what y is equal to and I plug it in right here for y. Now, in this one, the y was already solved for in this equation, so I could have just taken this whole thing and plugged it in where the y is over here. Either way, you still get the same answer in the end, so I'm going to keep doing what I did. So I take and I plug in the negative x plus 5 for the y right there. The rest of it stays the same. X squared minus 6x plus 9. Alright, so now I have to solve this, and it's a quadratic equation, which is what we did last unit. It should seem familiar to you. And you should know that no matter what you're doing to solve a quadratic equation, as long as you're doing it algebraically, you've got to get it equal to 0 first. So I'm going to start by adding x to both sides and subtracting 5 from both sides. That way I save some space by doing 2 steps in one. Right, the point behind that was to get 0 on this side over here. So the negative x plus x gives me 0, 5 minus 5 gives me 0, so on that side all I have left is 0. On this side I get x squared, negative 6x plus x is negative 5x, 9 minus 5 is positive 4. Now that I have it equal to 0, I can either use the quadratic formula or I can do factoring, if it's factorable. Since factoring so much quicker, I like to check usually to see if it is factorable first before I do the quadratic formula. So we're looking for factors of 4 that add together to give me 5. So factors of 4 are 1 and 4. When I add those, I do get 5, so that's the 2 I use. Now, since my leading coefficient is a 1, I can take a little shortcut and just go ahead and draw my parentheses, because I know this first term in both of these factors is going to be x. Because to get x squared, the only two things you can multiply together is x times x. Technically, you could do 1 and x squared, but I know that's not going to be the case of a factor. Alright, so then 1 and 4 are my factors of 4. In order to get negative 5, they both need to be negative. And whenever I multiply those two together, I still get positive 4. So now that I've factored, I've got two things multiplied together to give me 0, so I can use the zero product property, which says that if you got two things multiplied to give you 0, then one thing has to be 0, or the other thing has to be 0. So either value here would give us a true statement. So either x is positive 1 or x is positive 4. Now that's only our x values. In this case, we have to find our y values as well. So I'm going to take both of these values and I'm going to plug them in for x right there. Alright, so we've got y is equal to negative, and then plug in the 1, plus 5. Alright, so that gives me y is equal to negative 1 plus 5, which is 4. So one of my values, one of my solutions is 1, 4. And then when I plug in 4 for x, I get y is equal to 4 plus 5. Oh, I forgot my negative. Negative 4 plus 5, because there's negative right there. And then negative 4 plus 5 gives you 1. So that point is the point 4, 1. So there are my two solutions for this system now. There are two numbers that make both of these equations true. Alright, and you can plug them in to make sure they work. Plugging in 1, 1 squared is 1, 1 minus 6 is -5 plus 9 is 4. So that one works for that equation. 1 plus 4 is 5. 4 plus 1 is 5. So this one works for this one. And then if I plug this in for this one, 4 squared is 16. 6 times 4 is 24. So 16 minus 24 is 8, -8. -8 plus 9 is 1. So both of those points work when I plug them in. All right, last example. Coup de grace. We got a circle. This is the equation of a circle and a line. All right, so I'm going to start by solving the linear one for x. All right, so I'm going to take the x minus y is equal to 6. I'm going to subtract x from both sides. So we get negative y is equal to negative x plus 6. Divide both sides by -1. And you get y is equal to x minus 6. I take that value, plug it in where I see the y. Alright, I'm going to do this over here. So we got x squared plus, and where the y was, I plug in x minus 6. And that whole thing is squared. That's going to equal 26. So x minus 6 squared is the same thing as x minus 6 times x minus 6. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and multiply that out. So I get x squared, and then x times x. We got another x squared in there. Minus 6x. Minus 6x gives me minus 12x. And then -6 times -6 is positive 36. That's going to equal 26. So combining like terms, x squared plus x squared is 2x squared. Alright, now since this is quadratic, we've got to get it equal to 0. So I've got to subtract 26 from both sides. So I get 2x squared minus 12x plus 10 is equal to 0. Alright, so once again, I can do the quadratic formula where I can factor. I see that all three numbers have a GCF, so I'm going to factor out that GCF first. So I get x squared minus 6x plus 5. Alright, and I already know two factors of 5 that add up to 6, and that's 1 and 5. So I'm going to go ahead and finish factoring this. Alright, so I've got x and x, and then the factors of 5 that give me 6 are 1 and 5. In order for it to be negative, they both need to be negative. So I'm here once again doing my zero product property. So we've got either x minus 1 is equal to 0, or sorry about that, either x minus 1 is equal to 0, or x minus 5 is equal to 0. So either x is 1 or x is 5. Now maybe you wonder where'd the 2 go? Well, I know 2 isn't 0, so one of these two things had to be 0 using my zero product property. So now I'll plug each of these back in for x up here. We're in our home stretch here. So we've got y is equal to 1 minus 6. So when I plug in that 1, I get -5 for y. So that's one of my answers, is 1, -5. And then I got to plug in 5 for x. So when I do, I get -1. So the 2 points I get are 1, -5, and 5, -1. Alright, to plug them back in to check. 1 squared is 1, -5 squared is 25, 1 plus 25 is 26. And then 1 minus -5 is the same thing as 1 plus 5, that gives me 6, that works. 5 squared is 25, -1 squared is 1, 25 plus 1 is 26, that works. And then 5 minus -1 is the same thing as 5 plus 1, that gives me 6, that works. So they both check out. They both work. Alright, so I hope this video has helped. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. And good luck, and I hope you have a good one.